Start recording as well. Well, it's 3, and I think we should probably go ahead and get started. I'm sure some folks will be joining us. I want to ask Monica if she can do, she wanted to do some brief introduction, so I'm gonna share the mic with her, and then we'll swing it back to HRC.
Awesome, thank you so much. Hello everyone, thank you very much for joining us today. We are so excited for Harm Reduction Coalition to lead us in this workshop on community care and supporting staff to avoid burnout and compassion fatigue. I'm Monica Porter, and I'm joined by my colleague Eli Hamilton from Home Base. Home Base, as many as you know, is a nonprofit organization that provides technical assistance and training to San Mateo County's Human Services Agency and housing and homeless service providers. We're also joined today by Lodi Saba from HSA, so thank you to Lodi for joining us. And we're so glad to have all of you joining us in person for this session and this conversation. It's one that we've heard from providers is very much needed always, but especially now. As was mentioned, we will be recording for anyone who is not able to join us today. And I just want to note that messages shared over the chat will not be included in the recording. So thank you again, and looking forward to this conversation. Thank you.
Laura, it's all you.
Yes, so good afternoon, everybody. I'm Laura Guzman, and I am the Senior Director of Capacity Building and Community Mobilization at the Harm Reduction Coalition for California, and also sharing this training with my colleague Tanagra Melgarejo, who leads our national training work, and Charles Hawthorne, who's going to be doing tech and supporting us from beyond. And he actually leads our HRTI trainings in San Francisco. So you have an amazing team today. Just briefly about myself, I joined the coalition in February, but the 3 years prior, I worked at Everyone Home in the continuum of care for Alameda County. And before that, over 20 years of working in housing, in the intersection of housing and harm reduction. So this is a very special training for me. I'm gonna walk us through a little bit of who we are, and the Harm Reduction Coalition is a national organization. It was founded 25 years ago. And as you see, we have a broad spectrum of supports and training, and includes policy and advocacy. We do overdose prevention and intervention, both training and actually do distribution in San Francisco. We hold national and regional conferences. Actually, last year we had the first state California conference, and resources and publications to really advance, harm reduction, both understanding and harm reduction practices. You can move to the next one, Tani. I'm going to do very few Zoom housekeeping to make our hour and a half pleasant. And so we always encourage in trainings that you turn on your camera, even if you look like me, because we're all at home, and also because it really helps us with, sensing the room, knowing what you need as an audience. So that's important to us, but we also invite you to stay behind the camera. I also know some people may be joining by phone. You can add your pronouns to your name in the Zoom itself. And I don't know if anybody has ever tried, but you can go, is it on the top? Let me see. Help me here, Tanagra. Where can participants, you can go where participants
are. I just did it. You go through the 3 little dots, and then you're gonna find the third word is rename. You're going to click on that, and that would allow you to rename, whether you want to change your name or you want to add your preferred gender pronouns. You can do that. I just did it. I just took out my last name because it's really long, and now you can see you have my name and my preferred gender pronouns. So you can use that, like rename picture.
Great. And you can click the chat menu if you would rather comment in writing, but of course also would love you to raise your hand. We can see through the box whether you're ready to talk, because we're gonna invite you to this conversation. And I wanna say Tanagra and I we love facilitating training, so it's going to be a facilitated conversation. You can use the reaction functions to let us know how you're feeling, especially if you like it. There's nothing for this, so you can just go like this with your fingers, but there is a way to say this is, we like it, or applaud. We're hoping that we're gonna have more reaction functions in the future. And we're going to take a break, but feel free to take care of yourself while we are doing the training. And because Charles is on the tech, I know that things will go well, but if any tech issues happen, just roll with us. We'll try to get us back online.
Just wanted to say quickly, I have a little dog that is upset with the post person and with the fireworks. So I apologize in advance if for some reason during my piece of the training she barks. I fully apologize. She's very lovely, but she is quite a character, and she may just, you know, decide to let her voice be heard. So just giving you a heads up about that.
So what we're going to be doing 2 training sessions. In this session today, what we're going to do is explore the positive and negative impacts of stress on ourselves, share some stress reduction techniques to try on and off shift, also to use with your community directly, those of you who are doing direct services, reflect on how we can engage in sustaining community to care for each other, and discuss how community care supports our work in harm reduction or other social justice fields, for example, in the work you do around homeless and housing. So our agenda, I'm gonna be working first facilitating the impact of caring and going to define stress together, and also how are we feeling today. Actually, we're gonna be doing some little assessment of our stress and our support systems. And then Tanagra is going to take understanding resilience and community care. And in the midst of the agenda, we're gonna sense how tired you are and decide to take a break. We're also gonna have closing and evaluations that Tanagra will send to you. And we like to start with some group agreements, and anybody can also add, anyone that would like to add any that is now posted. Especially in online trainings, I think it's true in any conversation, we want to make sure that we take space because we want to share, we want to contribute and you know, say something, share something, learn something, but we also want to make space for those folks that are not, that are a little more shy, to use I statements when you're reflecting on your feelings, your thoughts and ideas. For people like Laura, to ask yourself, waste, why am I still talking? Being a big talker, constantly reminding, you know, ourselves, oh my God, I just talked the last 3 sessions of the training. So let me pass it to Tanagra. We also like the Vegas rule. And for those of you who don't know, it means that what is happening in this training, we want to keep it in this training. So I know it's somewhat hard to keep confidentiality in a space like this, but that's what we're trying to achieve, a very safe space for people to talk and share. Do you want to say what say rough is? Because I heard it only once, and it's Charles' rule.
Well, Charles shared this with me in another inception. I can let you, Charles, share if you want, if you feel like it. You go like this if you want to share it, and I'll let you like explain it.
This is a group agreement that I got when I was working with doing like trainings for the community around LGBTQ issues and identities. And so we would always say, like, say it rough, because sometimes you have a question that you really want to get out and you're not really sure how to say it in a way that sounds super neat, or you have a comment that you want to make that you want to talk about, but you're like, maybe this might cause some harm, or I'm not really sure if this is like the nicest or like most polite way to say it. So if you're ever in that space, just feel free to just like preface what you're going to say with like, all right, y'all, this might come out a little bit rough, or I'm going to say this rough. And then just say it the best you can. We always like to assume that people are speaking with the best intentions, and we like to deliver things with the best intentions. And if after you make your statement or ask your questions, if we want to unpack something you said, we'll do that. If we want to talk about it a little bit more, we'll do that. But then we'll answer your question. or we'll address your comment and bring it into our conversation. And what we won't do is just jump on you and say you're a horrible person because you don't know what you're talking about or whatever, because we're all here to learn and we're all here to grow. And we want to be able to do that here.
So there you go, say it rough. And last but not least, one diva, one mic, and sometimes it's easy to interrupt each other in Zoom, but well, again, we're here to facilitate and moderate, and sometimes we gotta just stop and then wait until the other person finishes. Is there any other rule that is not here that anybody wants to write up and add? If not, we'll move with the next slide, because we're gonna start doing a little bit of the stress scales assessment. And I don't know if you guys ever done it, but I actually went through a training, a leadership training that included some of the exercises we'll do later, which is about, using movement and breathing to actually bring upon very quickly relaxation. But I remember we were, our organization, the whole organization went through this training, and we started with the scale of stress. And so what we'll do is we're gonna start asking you. So we're asking you to actually respond to the questions we're posting on the stress scale in the chat, because Charles will be tabulating them so we can share with you. And so what we want first in the stress scale is to indicate your stress level on a scale from 0 to 10, where 0 is not stressed out at all and 10 is extremely stressed out. So go ahead now and put in the chat, where are you in that level of stress? Are we allowed to, right, Tanagra?
Folks can type in the chat box, and also if you feel like you want to unmute your mic and just say the number, you're welcome to do that too.
So we'll wait a second to make sure that everybody does the assessment.
But I'm seeing some 8s and some 6, some 7s, a 5. Someone was rushing. I hate rushing and getting to a meeting, and it's an 8. Someone said a 9. So it's between, I haven't seen anything lower than a 5. Mostly 6s, 7, 8, some good 5s, solid 6s. I see a lot of 6s. Someone said, I know, Connie's sharing with us since the verse has started has been an 11. Yes, I've been fluctuating. It's like sometimes there's not enough, not enough numbers on the scale. Absolutely. Let me see, some other folks are sharing with us 9 and 5.
So we would love to ask if one of you will be so brave to share with us, where are you now and where would you like to be? We'll start with that one. Who's gonna unmute the mic and share?
I'm sorry, was the question where we are now presently and then where we'd like to be, in our mind's eye?
Yes, so tell us, Elizabeth, where did you mark your stress level right now?
At an 8, I was case managing, and I didn't think it was going to take that long. So I got in my car, I was driving like a mad woman to get here, because I also wanted some time to breathe. But anyway, I got here a little late. So
Great. So where would you like to be if you could magically?
Oh, I really, I'm looking forward to listening to all the information you're going to be sharing with us, but I would love to be listening to you in a forest, just sitting down on Mother Earth.
That sounds beautiful. So a 4 is the target for Elizabeth. And I also see that Erica Q said I'm at a 9, but would love to be at a normal 4 or 5. I like a little stress. And I really thank you for saying that, because Tanaya and I were talking right before the training and talking about, we will go crazy if we didn't have a little stress in our lives. But again, we're all different. Tiffany, do you want to say a little bit more about you're at an 8.5 and you would like to be at a 5, what that means to you?
Yeah, I think I agree with Erica. I'm at about an 8.5 right now, and I think a 5 is normal for my position and role. There's just always something going on. So a 5 is a good stress level for me. It's what I can handle and almost what I thrive on.
Awesome. Anybody else that would like to share before we move into the next scale? We have 3.
My name is Melissa from Abode Services, and I'm at a 6 right now. I would like to be at a 4, but usually I live in 8 or 9. I mean, most days, but today I happen to be okay. I mean, not okay, but better. But my goal
Is there any reason that you feel that today you're in a 6 and not in an 8?
I did
Anything?
have my case workload today, which is, and I did administrative work today. So, and that's a little stressful, but not like usual.
Love it. All right, we're gonna move into the next one. And this is the social support scale. And so what we're asking you now is to describe your social support level on a scale from 0 to 10, where 0 is not supported at all and 10 is extremely supported.
And I want us to, once we're doing this, Jasmine has asked us if it's 0 stress is possible. And I know you're going to go into that in a little bit louder, but I just wanted to uplift it. That's such a good question, right? If it's possible and if it's good for us also.
We'll tackle that when we talk about stress. So please remind me. So it looks like we have pretty high numbers for the most part around the social support. Trying to see, we see some, lot of
We have
8s.
some 5, 6, 7s, 8s, 9s, many 10s too, which is awesome.
Yeah, and I would love to hear from both. So for someone that has put under 7, would you like to tell us where would you like to be around social support? Anybody who scored below 7 for this scale? Let's flip it to who wants to share that is in an 8, 9, or 10, in which ways you feel your social support is there for you. I don't want to call names, but I can.
Well, I was just gonna share briefly that my family, I'm from Puerto Rico originally, and all my family and my loved ones, most of my really good friends are back in Puerto Rico, and the distance, because of COVID-19 and the inability to we're also really touchy-feely people, right? Like we like to show our affection by touching and by holding and being together in the same space, and not being able to travel or be there with them, and thankfully having access to Zoom, so at least I can see them and hear them. But that's made it hard, because I feel for me, a lot of the way that I express affection and show support for folks is showing up and having dinner, breaking bread, sitting down and connecting. And I've had to readjust my expectations around that a little bit, because I think it's going to be a long time since I'm able to hug or touch my people. So I would like to potentially be at a 10, because that would mean that I get to see them.
So that someone wants to share where you want to be around social support. Anybody else? Taking Tanagra's example. And I ask Luz, who has a 7? Can you hear us, Luz? Luz Chavarin. Okay, I don't get to see or hear you. We can move in the next one then. So in this scale, and this one I always say to be very kind to yourselves as you assess your self-care, because sometimes we misinterpret what that means. It can mean a lot of different things. And later today, we're gonna share a tool for us to always be checking that. If you can indicate your self-care level on a scale from 0 to 10, where 0 is not practicing self-care at all, and again, without being super judgy, and 10 is so incredibly self-care, we would love to see how you assess yourself in that paradigm.
And I'm seeing some 4s, some 5s. I saw a 7, an 8, a 9. Someone is between 5 and 6. Another 4, a couple more 4s. A 9. 5 and 6. I think there's a lot of folks straddling the 5 and the 6. I love that. Being in the borderlands there. 5. Vanessa shared with us. Ruben says a 5-ish. That's how I'm feeling too. And Erica is sharing with us. She's also there in a 5.
So is there anyone that would love to share? Where would you like to be? What are the baby steps that you would like to take? And in harm reduction, we talk a lot about baby steps. Where is the little baby steps that you would like to take to be one number up or moving up?
And folks can type it in the chat box if they're shy, but we'd love to hear your voices.
Melissa, here, I'm at a 4 right now because I'm totally, I'm working from home, of course, and then I have a lot of, my husband's in nonprofit work as well, and my niece, I have a 16-year-old niece at home. So I'm like jumping from one thing to the next, and then all my work and my life is complicated. It's all in one place. So we've been trying to separate it out, make sure I have a good schedule, and drink more water.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And is there any other adjustments that you feel that could be done to get you to feel a little more self-care?
Yes, get outside more.
All right, that's awesome. Anybody else that wants to share where would you like to be, where you're now, where you, or what would help you to get where you want to be? That's sometimes is a tricky one to know what is exactly the action, the next step. Anybody ready to share that? What will help you to get a little more self-care?
Yeah, this is Elizabeth. I would love to be at a 6, 7. Ideally, right now, my days, just like Melissa's, are just kind of running. They're kind of all melding together. And if it's not one thing, it's another. But I feel that what I would like to do for myself on a regular basis, and I do it sometimes is to meditate, do a little bit of yoga in the evening, and I can do it on the computer. There are days that I'm able to do it, but then I think I'm like a stress junkie, because the moment I get back into that pattern, it's like, I'm running around like crazy. But I know, ideally, I just need to make the time and stick to a schedule, regardless of what's happening, do the meditation, do a little bit of yoga, definitely get out every day. And sometimes I don't leave my chair. So
it sounds like what you're talking, Elizabeth, is, and I think we all might be junkies that way, is the consistency of a practice, right? Whether it's and what makes sense and what's possible. Yes. I share that with you. I sign up for yoga classes and I end up only doing the Sunday class, even though I have a lot of illusions that I'm going to do it in the week. And then life gets in the way. But, what would it take? And I keep asking myself every week, what can I do to add that extra class?
I was going to ask, I was just thinking about this, that we were facilitating a similar conversation with another group, and folks said that thinking about self-care, just thinking about what would help them get to the place they want to be or where they would like to be, they feel guilty because they felt thinking about self-care in this moment when we're facing this horrific conditions in the world. Some of them have been happening for a long, long time. And, you know, we're seeing them come forward because now there's more access to social media and folks being able to, you know, film things that are happening in communities that have been happening for a long time. And we know that. But also during COVID-19, this pandemic, that also another, on top of the violence pandemic that we've been experiencing, that folks felt really guilty thinking even about self-care because they thought, you know, I feel that I shouldn't have room for that because that means that if I have room, someone else doesn't have it. And we were thinking about, wow, like that's interesting. And how would it be for us to not feel guilty about thinking that it's okay for us to care for ourselves, right? That it is important to do that. I don't know if other folks feel that way, but I just thought that to me resonated. I see that Melissa is going like this. I wonder if other folks are feeling that way. You can either chat it or maybe like do a thumbs up if that's something, because I think for us direct service workers, that is like the guilt around caring for ourselves is big.
And Sherry says yes. Do you want to say a little more, Jerry?
Better than her. I totally agree 100%. Yeah.
Yeah, and I just want to close the self-care. Also, the guilt about not doing enough self-care. I think I'm hearing Elizabeth and I hear myself. It's like every day, you know, being proactive about seeing it as actually a good baby step to think about what I do one more thing rather than torturing myself for not doing that one more thing. So working through guilt. In harm reduction, we say guilt is paralyzing and actually stays in the way of change. So just one more food for thought. But this was fabulous. Thank you for assessing yourselves. And we wanted to move it a little bit farther into specifically, what are some of the impacts of caring about your clients and work? Because I think that we want to just finesse a little bit more about how in general stress, but in particular doing the work we do impacts our lives, our days, our weeks. So we'll be actually writing them up. And so again, if you can do it via chat or through the mic. What are some of the impacts of caring about your clients and work? Monica, was that you? I thought Monica was ready to say something. No. We would love to hear a little bit about what is particularly challenging and how it impacts yourselves physically, emotionally, in whatever dimensions that it impacts your work.
This is Teresa from Abode. I would think for me, what the biggest impact is on my family, because I tend to be so burnt out by the end of the day, and just all the drama with the clients and feeling like I'm not doing enough to get them housed, and especially during COVID. Feeling like, how can I complain when I get to go home to my cozy bed and shop on Amazon and Instacart and I'm not worried. I just feel like, how could I have it worse than our clients? So I feel like I'm guilty about even verbalizing it. And then I get home and I'm kind of moody with my family or I'm at home when I'm working and I'm moody with my family because I think, well, again, I'm thinking about what our clients have to deal with. And so it's hard to be like sensitive to my husband or my son when, you know, they have it so much better. So that's sort of it.
That's an excellent example. Who else would like to share? And we're putting those that are on the chat. Anybody that wants to share on the mic, your particular impacts?
Sometimes I lose sleep worrying about the clients.
Anyone else?
Sometimes you get some sort of secondhand trauma from hearing their traumas, and you go home and you sort of like think about it, not necessarily like it doesn't affect me personally, but just, you know, as I'm doing something and it triggers that memory, I think back to that client, like, oh, you know, so sort of secondhand trauma.
Awesome, and we'll spend next week just talking about the direct relationship between the trauma that impacts our clients' lives and how that vicarious trauma, it's very much alike trauma. So we'll be going deeper on that on next week. Thank you for that, Sandra. Any other impacts that people would like to share? And I think vocalizing and visualizing is also a way of starting to really look at, you know, what is this feeling that I have of, you know, whether it's burnout or whatever ways that you frame it.
For me, when I was doing direct service work, I felt like I gave everything I had to the clients. So I had nothing else to give for myself. So the impact was that I was depleted by the time I realized that I needed to support myself. I didn't know how to find that balance. And it was really hard. And when I realized, you know, that I needed to find balance, I had hit burnout. And so it was a hard road back. But it was, you know, for me, the impact is sometimes not knowing where to strike that balance and make sure that I'm giving enough, but also make sure that I can have enough for myself, that I don't run on an empty gas tank. Is that how you say that in English? Right? Okay.
Empty gas tank, yeah. That's great.
Hi, Tiffany here.
Tiffany, go.
Yeah, one of my coworkers framed this really well for me. There's never any, I'm trying to think how to frame it. With the work that we do, because we're working with actual human beings and their lives, there's never an end. There's never a conclusion. It's not like going to the bar, being a bartender, and finishing your job, because the job is never done. Even if you leave, there's still more to work on. The day never ends. So there's never that satisfaction of my work here is done. There's always something else going on.
It's so important you're bringing that out, Tiffany, because I was going to say, you know, having worked in a drop-in center that saw 250 people a day for 16 years, you know, managing all, there was this feeling of, again, it's like, and the stories of our people continue to be the same. And at that time also we were, and still true, I mean, we were primarily targeting and serving immigrants. And so there was very little access to housing. There was whatsoever from the start, even though it's true for everybody else. And I want to say that I learned this this technique of energy management versus time management, because I could, if I imagine this as a time, you know, there's a time by which you begin and you end and there is an outcome, that was going to keep me trapped forever. And so this idea of energy management, which now I share a lot as I go into other organizations, is, you know, how do I manage my energy so I can continue to do this work, which is never ending. But I think it's really very important to notice that that's the experience we have. It's never enough. Whatever I do is never enough. And also that makes us sometimes feel really bitter when our clients come and say, you're not doing enough, because that reinforces that sort of like mechanism of guilt, but also a framing that is not real in some way. So I'm so glad, Sandra, you shared that. Anybody else before we move on? Anybody else? I just want to make sure, I think it's good. It's cathartic to share it if anybody else wants to.
I wanted to add, you know, this probably goes along with Tiffany Bailey. I have a hard time disconnecting. Like, you know, once I have something traumatic happen with a client or, you know, something very stressful at work, it's hard for me to disconnect. And so I actually moved out of the area up in the mountains so I can have that time to disconnect. So that's what's challenging for me.
And Adriana is sharing, Melissa, that also something that I think is connected to what you're saying, which is now that we're working from home, there's no separation, right? Because going home was the cue in my brain to say, okay, I have 30 minutes on my drive to process what I need to process, and then I can just let go and transition. But now how do you transition when everything's happening in the place that, you know, you're living and you're working, right? And I think that connects with that, yeah.
And I want to say also that as we move into trauma, more going deeper on trauma next week, we'll also understand that startle effect that keeps us haunted with the same thought process, ruminations, stress and anxiety that is automatic. And so today we're gonna have a little bit of a, feeling for it by talking about stress, and then we're gonna ramp up the discussion and hopefully the ways in which we can really address that. How do you cut that film? I call it, the movie in Spanish, para esa película, stop that movie right now, because it keeps going and it keeps you're not ever refreshed next day to do the same work. So with that, I think I'm gonna move us to a little model. And do you mind to share this, Tanaira, what drives us to care about others?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. When I saw this slide the first time somebody shared it with me, I was like, wow, this totally makes sense. And thinking about where I position myself throughout my career and my work, and the impact that that's had in the way that I've been able to engage with people, right? So I just want to get like a temperature check and see where folks feel that they are, right? In terms of caring, like, where do you think you are? If you are, between pity and altruism, where would you think, if you think, oh, this is how I relate to people and I care for people in this way, what would it be? Compassion. So Tiffany's sharing with us that she centers herself in compassion, which is she's seeing and sharing emotions with people and will help support them in their suffering. Someone else is saying that they're moving between sympathy and compassion, right? In between those three steps. And I am going to see if we can share the slides via email. I will definitely share them during break with you all, so you can refer to them, absolutely. And I will make sure that we can make them accessible. Maybe sooner. So for folks that are not able to see the slides, we have pity, sympathy, empathy, compassion, and altruism, right? And pity is the lower end of the scale, right? And then altruism is what we think we should achieve, right? But the more that we care, the more that we stress, right? The more that we care for people, the more that our stress is heightened. And when we think of that and we think of altruism as the ultimate spot for stress, right? Altruism means what? Means that I am caring for others, but I'm not caring for myself. I'm putting others before I put myself first. And that sometimes is what leads us to burnout, to compassion fatigue, to experience vicarious trauma in ways that can be really harmful for us, but also for program participants, because our instrument is this: our heart, our minds, and our bodies. And if we are not in a space where we feel healthy and well, then sometimes, I know when I've been burnt out, I have been really horrible to people that I loved and care about, right? Because I was in that, I felt that I had to be altruistic. I had to put everybody first before I put myself first. And my needs and my concerns were not necessarily important in that process. And I think that, if we see this as a long-term process of life, thinking about how maybe we can sit between empathy, sympathy, and compassion, right? Depending on the situation. Elizabeth is sharing that she moves between those depending on the situation and if they're been triggered, right? And I think that's a really good example. If I can put you on the spot, Elizabeth, to share un poquito más about, that you have shared, moving between those three with folks.
Sure. I guess it's just life past or life experiences. And when I see them and am able to feel them, I'm not necessarily in a good place to just put those aside. I get really involved, which I feel that maybe even sometimes it could be pity.
Yes.
But the moment I start feeling pity, I'm like, oh, no.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And I think sometimes for me, when you said that, made me think of the fact that sometimes as providers, a lot, I was sharing this, our trauma and our histories come up. And sometimes we see participants and we project without even knowing our experiences onto them. And somehow I felt if I save this participant, right? If I save, which is here, I'm the savior, I'm coming to take care of you. Somehow I'm going to be saving myself. And that was such a disservice to them and to me, right? Because I'm trying to save you means that I pity you ultimately, that I don't really believe that you have the power or the capacity to make decisions. And I think that Jasmine is saying, and I think this is such a good point, I want to call this also, and see if you want to share, Jasmine, that it depends, that we can be in any of these steps at a given time, right? Do you want to share a little bit more, Jasmine, if you feel comfortable about, what your thought is behind that? Because I really appreciate that comment.
Yeah, hi everyone. So I was gonna say it just depends. Oh, there's my dog barking, of course.
No worries.
The perfect timing. Okay, sorry.
No worries.
So I was gonna say it just depends how the clients are, because there's some clients that I feel like, they need more hand holding in a way, and you're kind of like, oh, like I can't do this, and that's when you like, oh, I can help you. And then there's other clients that are more like, I can do it, no worries. And so I don't know, that's what I kind of see it. In that way. Yeah. So
I wanted to add that the connection between this scale with increase in stress is particularly important to pay attention, and we'll talk in a minute. And I know someone is asking for a bathroom break, so we'll do it as soon as we finish this particular dialogue. But we'll learn that actually stress goes up as fear goes up, right? And that's a very natural human automatic response. And so it's interesting to know, what do we fear about as we're working with clients, and some things that we have no control, like systems, and the way that we're not developing housing, or we're not developing adequate housing, or all of those things. Actually being aware of that fear, what is that fear about, really also may make us respond in a particular way. So also when we're hella tired, I remember Friday afternoons in the drop-in center, at the end of the day, I couldn't really do great de-escalation because I was not in my best. I was already so tired that my empathy really dropped. So Friday by 5 o'clock, my empathy really dropped so much that even when I got home, I didn't want to talk to anybody, right? So we'll notice that connection between fear and sort of like, our ability to respond, quote unquote, properly to what's going on with clients. I'm just wondering if it's okay, someone asked for a bathroom break, can we take it right now? And we'll do, tonight is 10 minutes, we'll be back at 3:52.
Yes, we can take the minutes and be promptly back at 3:52. We will see you and we continue this conversation. Thank you everybody for being so engaged.
Thank you. Annie, you want to take it from stress on?
I'm happy to take it from here. Yeah, from understanding stress. I'm sudando.
What I can do in the second session when we do trauma, I can do a little bit more about what is traumatic stress, and then get a little more discussion around traumatic stress.
Yeah, it's like cuando trauma is such a box of chocolates. You never know what you're gonna get. Some days I'm like, oh, I think I thought I had worked on this, and all of a sudden something creeps in, and I'm like, oh shoot, trauma's here. I thought I had you. Yeah, okay, Melissa, it's going like this, right? It's like you're like, it always surprises you. It's like, I thought I had, it keeps you humble.
That is so true. That is so true.
It keeps you
I'm gonna
humble.
take a very quick break. 2 minutes. I'll be back, Dani.
No worries.
So we'll get ready to start, and I am going to pass the mic to Tanagra. And just for you to know, she just shared the PowerPoint through the chat. And so, and we'll try to figure out also to send it via email. But if you want, what you do is you'll have to get into it and then save it so you can keep it. But we'll make sure that we'll do that also after the training. So.
Yeah, and we will also make sure that we share it with Monica so that she can have it available to email everybody for next week's training, which we hope you're joining us for. Thank you, everyone. I hope that you were able to take a good break. These 10-minute breaks really help, right? To get us talking about self-care and caring for ourselves and dealing with stress. I really appreciate having them just to remind myself to be in my body, right? And so now we're going to be moving into thinking about what is stress and understanding stress. And then from there, we're going to chat about resilience, which is a tool that we have available to us to help us navigate situations that can be really stressful, right? So when we think of stress, there's this definition by Hans Sees, which is from 1936, and I still think it's really accurate today, which is the non-specific response of the body to any demand for change, right? And it means that sometimes we're being exposed to ongoing stress that is toxic, right? Which is trauma in the womb, and it can affect the development of organs like kidneys, heart, and brain. So knowing that, you know, when we're exposed to that kind of stress, even from the womb, it will have effects on our body long-term, right? And that's why we think about epigenetics and the genetics of trauma, right? Thinking about, you know, how that plays a role in people's development, ability to move through the world, to navigate situations that are complex and complicated and potentially can become harmful to them. And then thinking about that when we're in stress, our body releases hormones, right? Which increase the heart rate and the breathing rates, and it's telling our muscles to get ready. And as I'm saying this to you, I'm feeling it, you know, that is the fight, run, or play dead. Fight, flight, or fight mode, right? Which is, you know, like the freeze, you know, the run, or the fight back. And I don't know if you've been in a situation where this has happened to you, but I've been in situations where all three of them are manifesting themselves at the same time, and I can feel them, you know, coming in and out and manifesting themselves. Sometimes we'll see this with our participants. So understanding this, I had a participant that whenever I had to share with her a stressful situation or something that I knew would be stressful to her, I knew she would start screaming. And she wasn't screaming at me. That was her reaction, to fight. And then she was like, I let her, she had like her moment, like she vented. And then she said, okay, I'm sorry. I said, it's okay. That's why we're here. Let's just then, are you ready for us to look at this differently? And she's like, okay, I have to do what I needed to do to be able to move through the situation. I had other participants that whenever I shared with them something that was stressful or traumatic to them, they would just look at me and completely dissociate, right? They were not able to connect. I see that Melissa's nodding her head, right? Like she would not be able to, that's the playing dead kind of situation. And then there's participants that, you know, sometimes they would just stand up and be like, I'm done. I can't sit here anymore, I have to go. And that's the run, right? So helping us understand that can help us better frame things, but also to give people the space to feel what they're feeling, right? Because sometimes I know I wanted to run out of the room myself, but I have found a way to stay in there, right? So thinking about stress in this way and understanding that stress is very much a part of our work, and that we're handling our stress. And as someone said before, the stress of working with our participants and experiencing the situations that sometimes can be really hard. We're holding that vicarious trauma, and that causes stress. And so when we think about
Tonight, I wanted to add one thing as you're saying about the definition is that was done in 1936, but recent studies of our brain and recent studies around which part of the brain we're running, you know, we're mostly running our activities all day. This is regardless if we work in housing and homeless or harm reduction, is that we really are still seeking threat. Our brains are still pretty much reptilian in any given day. So this is when we were driving, you know, to try to go to work. I'm thinking 101 for all the folks in San Mateo. For me, it was crossing the bridge from East Bay to San Francisco. And that alone, just that alone, makes us really still very Velcro to really seeking threat 24/7. And this is just a human, so it's what we're finding that is true for all of us. So I think it's very important to know that that mechanism that we're going to talk about resilience in a moment, it's about survival. It's also a mechanism that really we're locked in, and we have to really work it to not constantly feel that fear that is always with us.
Absolutely. And I think also thinking about how does my body respond to stress? Like, it's taking me 47 years to get to a place where I'm like aware of like, oh, when I feel stress or when I'm feeling these things coming up in my body, right? This means that I am responding to the situation. This is my body's demand for like my response to that demand of change, right? Whether it's exciting, like think about a good stress situation, like you want $1 million, right? That's good stress. We're excited, our heart's pumping, we're psyched, in our heads we're making lists. Oh my God, like these are the things I'm gonna do, and I'm gonna donate here, I'm gonna support my kids with this, or my partner, or my friends. This is awesome. I'm gonna save for a trip when we can travel. All those things. That's good stress, right? There's a reaction in our body from that. But then if we think about COVID-19 and we had news, for example, of, maybe, something having to do with our community or an impact that could potentially we face economically, right? And financially, that's other stress. Whenever I think about my fridge breaking, I cry because I would think, oh my God, I have no money to buy a new fridge. And if social services find out that I don't have a fridge in my house and I have a teenager, they may come in and they would take my child away from me, right? And that's a catastrophic brain, but that is also a reaction, a different reaction to stress, not the good stress, right? Like my heart's pumping, I'm sweating, but it's because I'm freaking out, about what I'm gonna do, right? So those are two examples of how this can manifest itself in different situations, right? And when we think of stress, there's the short-term stress, that's the stuff that we're talking about, which is, short-term stress around, compassion, satisfaction, like feeling like good about something. I am taking a test. This is my finals. I'm going to ace it. This is the last test I'm going to take in my career. I am going to ace it and I'm going to graduate with a GPA of 4.0 and I'm going to be a summa cum laude and it's going to be awesome. I'm going to have my master's, right? That it's like, that satisfaction that comes from, knowing that I am sweating this through the end because I see the end. I know the end is near and I know that I can do it and I have support and I have the resiliency to help me get through it, right? That's short term. When we think of chronic stress, that's the stress that is not so good, right? That's the stress that we experience when we have burnout or compassion fatigue, right? I remember one day I also worked in housing. I worked with survivors in Puerto Rico, with survivors of intimate partner violence. And we had funding through HUD to run a housing program for them. And I remember having a participant who had several mental health conditions that were not under control. And one day at 8:00 in the morning on a Friday, I see her right before we're gonna open with 2 big bags. And she comes in and she's like, here are my keys. I don't want to live there anymore. Because, she felt something in the house was threatening her, right? And I looked at her and I said, okay. And so, what are we going to do, right? And I said to her, hold on a minute. And I left the office and I started crying, like bawling to my coworker. And she's like, she thought something really horrible had happened. And I said, I don't know I just can't today. Friday at 8:00 in the morning, I just don't think I don't have anything else in me to support her and to be there for her. And I felt so guilty about that. And thankfully my coworker said to me, okay, like, limpiate los mocos, clean your snot, like breathe, take your time. I'll go in and I'll support you. And let me see what I can find out. And I will help you. I will help you navigate the situation with the participant, right? But I felt really ashamed because that's when I realized not only that I was burnt out, but that I had compassion fatigue. I just felt, you know what? I just don't want to live there anymore. Like, then don't, you know what I mean? And that is not who I am. And that's not who I want to be. And so that's being exposed to that long-term chronic stress that happens when we're dealing constantly with experiences and situations from people that we care about deeply, but that sometimes our brain and our hearts just have to shut down because otherwise it becomes too much, right? It becomes too much. And that's like what Laura was explaining, that's our protection mechanism, right? To be able to, your body saying, stop, you gotta take care of yourself in this moment. And I see some heads nodding from folks. This resonates with folks. If you want to just chat in the chat box, if this makes sense, there's two ways of acknowledging stress. I see Jasmine's going like this. I'm saying the people that I can see on my screen. And if you don't agree, let us know also. So we want to move from that long-term chronic stress. We want to figure out ways to address it, right? Because sometimes we can step away from it. It's in our lives, but there's things we can do to help us care for ourselves to avoid getting to that place of compassion fatigue and burnout. And, you know, one more thing that I found really useful was seeing, you know, how burnout and compassion fatigue interconnect, right? If we think of this as a Venn diagram, in that middle, right, there's things that are common for both, right? There's things that only happen when we're burnt out, right? Burnout is related to systems and institutions, right? It is something that we can fix or address by changing our job duties or changing our jobs in general. It affects the way that we view our workplace. Folks that are high achievers are mostly at risk, and it's gradual, right? Like it comes gradually. It's like over a period of time, you start sort of like getting to a place where you feel burnout. And then when we think of compassion fatigue, the onset is really quick. Like that morning, I was just like, this is it. You know, I can't. It happens to people that are most empathetic. So most empathetic folks are at risk of experiencing it. It gives us a sense, or we feel meaningless and hopelessness. Like we can't fix things. We can't support people. There's nothing we can do. And we're just sitting in that space of feeling really impotent. It reduces our ability to feel sympathy or empathy. Like I said, I just didn't really care that day. I was just like, I just don't have anything. I don't have anything else. 1 ounce of care in this moment. And that felt really gross to me. It's due to repeated exposure to the trauma of others, right? And it shares aspects of PTSD, right? So these are things that are particularly experienced by folks that experience burnout and compassion fatigue. But then there's the middle, right? And that's the stuff that both of them have in common. We isolate from others. It leads us to have physical, mental, emotional exhaustion. It reduces our sense of meaning or accomplishment in our work setting. Like you don't feel whether you're burnt out or experiencing compassion fatigue. You don't understand why you're doing this work. You're questioning why. Like it doesn't have meaning. I don't feel I'm achieving anything. And compassion fatigue and burnout can occur together or separately, right? So for me, they both occurred together. But I also have had colleagues where they've experienced only burnout, or folks that have only experienced compassion fatigue at different times in their career, right? So it's for us to think about, you know, we're sharing this as a way for us to reflect and see where we could be in terms of some of these feelings, right? As a self-assessment that we're also gonna share with you in the tools at the end of the training. We're gonna share an assessment tool for you that will be helpful, hopefully, in maybe figuring out how to address some of these things if you're experiencing them.
Tonight, I wanted to share one experience that I had because I never had burnout doing the work in the field for so long, but I had an episode of compassion fatigue after being assaulted on the street by one of our community members, not in the setting where I worked. And it was a weird kind of assault on the streets, but the first reaction was actually nothing happened for me. It was that, you know, I knew the person, I loved the person. I went back to the office. I told my staff what happened. And people start getting upset. And I'm like, you know, it's nothing. I can deal with this. And then within 24 hours, I was starting to feel like I cannot do this job anymore. And it didn't matter how many years I did. But that particular episode, and this is to highlight that sometimes we have episodes that can really be a quick trigger of that compassion fatigue, and that it's not really related to burnout, is that sometimes we're really exposed to things that are really intense, not only what we see from others, but also when we are the recipients. And so that was an experience for me that it took me a while. In fact, I did take time off because I didn't want it. And my staff says, you take time off. And so when I came back and, you know, I got to see the person, it was a female actually, got to see her several times after, and it was okay. But at that moment, it was a moment where I felt like, oh, I cannot do this work anymore. It was very saddened.
Yeah. And I'm sure, like, and that's a hard realization to have by ourselves. And particularly also, if, you know, how do we have supports where we can say that, like verbalize it, say it out loud, because there's no shame, you know, in feeling those things. And sometimes I felt I haven't been able to say it because I feel guilty and I feel ashamed and I feel I'm not doing my job, right? So all these things mixed in, and then it just paralyzes us. And so having a cohort of peers, a group of peers where we could we could create that space to share how we were feeling, and if we were struggling or having a hard day, or say, you know what, today I'm here and I only have 50%, so I'm going to be doing these things. And other people could say, I'm 100% today. I'm feeling good. I'm doing good. I can take on this other stuff that is more forward facing, was helpful. So it's like thinking about you or peers and folks that you work with, your colegas, you know, your companions at work, and figuring out ways in which you can create that team support for each other and create the space to normalize having these conversations in our work settings is also really important. As Laura was saying, you know, she had the support from her staff to say, it's okay, you get to take care of yourself, that is important. And understanding that and realizing that is part of resilience too, right? Resilience is about, you know, how do we navigate our feelings, that's self-regulation, understand when we need to take care of ourselves, and having the self-awareness to figure out both, right? When we're dealing with situations that are grounded in stress. And so when we think of self-regulation, for me, is how do I regulate my behavior and my actions, right? I am someone who, when stress is not necessarily connected to me, when there's good stress in the environment, like I love to run a drop-in center, I love to run activities with participants, I love, you know, cooking and serving the food and putting the movies together. I love all that stuff because that, to me, it's good stress, right? But then there's the stress where, like, you know, I would call to figure out if they were getting their housing that day and there was no housing, and I had to go back to them and tell them, I'm sorry, you know, the bed that we had for you in this space is not available. How do I regulate my behavior and my actions so I don't transmit that stress to them, right? Because I need to be holding that. They already have enough stress themselves, right? The self-awareness of thinking about, you know, what is happening with my body, my mind, and my spirit, you know, on that day. And so what we learned to do was to do what they call now a vibe check-in. Every morning before we started work, our colleagues, we would sit down in a circle before we opened the space. And we said, so in terms of percentage, what percentage are you today? How are you feeling? 100% was, I'm great, I'm good, I'm awesome. 50%, it's like, 30% was, I had a fight with my kid, and the money that I thought was coming in is not coming in, and I had a fight with my sister, I'm not good today. I'm not in a good headspace, right? So being aware of what's happening with our minds, our body, and our spirit, it's part of that self-awareness, right? So we can ask for what we need. And our colleagues know then what they can offer us. And finally, is how do I care for myself, right, in order to continue living and doing this work? And that's something that after that episode was a hard reality break for me. You know, like I was like, okay, if I want to continue to do this work that I'm passionate about and that I believe I'm good at, I need to figure out how to create that balance, right? How to create balance so that I am able to be the best that I can be for myself and for my participants, right? So thinking about those three things, and these are some questions you're gonna have, these documents, we encourage you to think through them and to ponder them and maybe make a little plan for each of them, right? Because I know for myself, this has been helpful as I transition to other spots and places of work. Laura, you want to say something?
I wanted to add, when I did my crisis prevention de-escalation trainings, learned that between self-awareness and self-regulation, it's a very tight connection because we react and actually act out, which actually makes us then feel even more guilty. Sometimes we go like, yeah, I just went off and that felt good. But generally, not being aware of our body, mind, and spirit when we are stressed results in us not self-regulating and actually being what I call a contributing factor in the situations that our folks face every day. So in a good day where I'm, you know, my self-care has been good, especially a good weekend, I've been able to sleep at night, not think about what's happening with clients, then my self-regulation may be much better, but also I tend to really, and one thing we'll do more when we talk about trauma is talk about the body, you know, learn to know where in your body you start feeling that stress. Because as Tanagra says, sometimes it takes time to really figure it out and figuring out also what do I do at that moment to stay grounded. Because if I'm not self-aware, I will immediately make the client at fault. And I hope you all have done that like I have, or your supervisor or your colleague, because that's that immediate reaction that we're not really processing like, oh, I'm really tired and actually I get tickled very easily. when, you know, on a Friday afternoon, I need to do a placement on a non-placement for a client. And so at least I know how to manage that every Friday, because I know those of you who work, you know, in housing placement or shelter placement, you might go through that every day. We used to do one day shelter reservations at the resource center for 16 years for only one night. So every night we had to deal with people's anxieties about it. So how do we are aware and self-regulate is real important.
I see Adriana is saying yes. Using, I love that they're using the little reaction buttons. That's awesome. And so what we want to do now is ask you, and if Charles is with us, Charles, would you mind annotating for me? And if I think Charles maybe still here with us, but I want to ask you, what are some techniques that you have used to manage stress and take care of yourself? If you can think of things that you've done that have worked, that you would want to share to the collective, backpack or basket or maleta or purse of techniques that we can all take home with us today, what would one be? One thing that you have done to help you manage stress and take care of yourself that you find it's like particularly useful. And I'm gonna try to do 2 things at once, which is not necessarily my forte, but we'll see.
Forest bathing. Charles is here, Tani.
Okay.
I can't see him, but I can.
Forest bathing. Saging. I want to hear more about the forest bathing. Saging and crystals. And I apologize if, oh, there we go. Thank you, Charles. Yoga. Remember to have lunch, Jess. 100%. As a fellow person who needs to eat, I appreciate that. Yes. Yes. Eat, sleep, and go on walks. JC's sharing with us. Bill shared yoga. Nick is sharing music and exercise. Absolutely. Melissa, thank you. Taking breaks and making sure that we honor those breaks. Absolutely. M. Hardy is saying praying and journaling. I really love the journaling piece as well as connecting to our higher forces. Taking a walk, having snacks and water, yes. Being hungry and thirsty at 3 o'clock on a Friday when we have 2 participants or a couple of participants left to go, not good, right? I am like always, people know this about me. When I travel with this big bag of snacks everywhere I go. I always have snacks in my bag. I can, you know, just always, because I need them. Absolutely. These are all really great. Absolutely. Okay. People can share more if they want, but I want to invite Laura to, oh, Tiffany's sharing with us, leaving my computer at work so she doesn't have to take it at home. Yes, it's like a way of creating that separation, right? It's saying, you know, I'm going home. I don't need to bring my computer with me. I am giving myself permission to leave it here. Monica is sharing with us, talking with a therapist. Absolutely. Talking to a therapist. If you have clinical supervision, that is something for me that has been such a life-transforming experience to have access to a clinical supervisor and peer supervision too. Elizabeth is sharing connecting with nature. Yes, the sea, the forest bathing, just going outside and just like feeling the sun and the wind, you know, touch your skin. It's so important. Absolutely.
I just want to note that it's very interesting and also important to notice that most of the techniques include the body. And this is because I want to guide us now. We're going to take, I don't know how much we have on time, but we'll do probably no more than 5 minutes of the same training I started telling you today when we were assessed the stress level. So one thing I'm going to do after the exercise is to check how do you feel your stress level is go through this Niroga training. And I don't know if anybody knows Niroga in Oakland. It's in fact the director used to work in Silicon Valley and made a lot of money and was very bitter and unhappy. And he was from India and decided, actually he was a colleague in one of my fellowships, but he decided to use yoga and meditation, you know, from the Indian tradition and to go to schools, to go to jails and prisons. And so Niroga does a lot of trainings in the community of breathing meditation and yoga movement, actually breathing and yoga, actually I would call it breathing and movement to help people with histories of trauma or who are dealing with stress to do practices that really help that. And so we're gonna share with you after, but right now what I'm gonna ask you, couple of things we're gonna do a very simple breathing meditation with some movement. We're gonna move a little bit the shoulders. I wanna give you a preview for those of you who, I wanna invite you. It's gonna be neck and shoulders. We're not gonna stand up today, although next time we might wanna do that. And two things I learned. The more you, when you're breathing, the longer you exhale, the more you relax. And the more that you do breathing along movement, the more you relax. Those were two things that I learned from that training. Also, some of us, like me, I have severe anxiety. Sometimes just breathing and not moving, it's really hard. So what we'll do is, if you can, I'm hoping you'll have some kind of a comfortable chair. If it's not too comfortable, you'll do your best, or get into a chair, because I'll guide us. And we're gonna start with the breathing meditation. Make sure that you're sitting really, actually gotta take my pillow from mine. And make sure you're grounding your feet. And we're gonna, when we inhale, we're gonna expand the belly. And we exhale, we're gonna contract the belly. So let's do that for a minute. And we're just gonna do it at your own timing. So we expand the belly, inhale. Contract the belly, exhale. Expand. Exhale. Expand. Exhale. Just go in your own breathing, expand and exhale. Notice if you can expand the belly and inhale by the count of 4 and exhale by the count of 4. Inhale, exhale. Let's do 2 more. Inhale, exhale. 1 more together. Exhale. All right. Now we're gonna keep with that breathing, but we're gonna move our shoulders. So remember, and usually, those of you who know yoga and me know more than me, but when you go up with your shoulders, you inhale. When you go down, you let go. Inhale. Exhale, let go. You can make noise too. Inhale. Let go. 1 more. Inhale. Let go. Now we're gonna do the same, but with the shoulder. So we're gonna inhale to the center, exhale to the side. Inhale to the center, exhale to the side. Keep it on your own pace. Inhale to the center, exhale. Let's do 2 more. Inhale to the center, exhale. Now to close, we're gonna just move in circles, and you can do back and forward. And remember to keep that breathing with your belly expanding and contracting. And stretch up. How did that feel? Yeah, thumbs up. In an ideal situation, we can do a little bit more and do a little more standing, and we will be sharing the Niroga, because I've done in a lot of my trainings in de-escalation, use it with people, and we don't, I think it was that, I'm trying to remember who said it earlier, Monica or Melissa. It's so hard to have that practice to do it. But if we could just figure out something that we can do, and even if it is 2 minutes in an ongoing basis, every time that you have a conversation that is difficult with clients, at the research setting at the end, we were doing some of this breathing with clients, and clients really appreciated it, that ability to have a minute to breathe. And I just would love a couple of you to say, how does your stress level feels after you do a little bit of that very simple exercise? Anybody? Like, I get lightheaded because I've been working, you know, I haven't had enough oxygen. So I just got lightheaded, which is good. Anybody else? You can write it too. I feel better.
Mm-hmm.
Wonderful. Well, we might bring it back next week to do a little bit more relaxed. I love that, because I want to make sure that we have enough time. I'm going to let Tanagra.
Thank you, Laura, for sharing that. I have to say that I really appreciate the breathing, and somebody shared tapping as a way to manage stress, and we shared both with participants as tools that they could use when they were not with us to be able to navigate, you know, stress or handle situations that felt overwhelming. And they would, you know, when they came back, they said, you know what, I used my breathing today. I sat at the office and I was really frustrated, and I used my breathing and it helped me. So it definitely, I know it helps me, and I'm grateful that you reminded us to breathe, because sometimes my yoga teacher tells me, suelta el respiro, breathe, you're not breathing, girl. And it's true, I'm not breathing. So this is a good reminder. Breathing brings us back to our body and to that mindfulness. Absolutely. You know, it's Charles is saying that doing that helped them really from getting wound up. Absolutely. And it's true. You know, it helps us unwind. And so now, awesome. And now we're going to be wrapping up, and we want to think about, how do you think self-care and community care relate to each other? And I want to ask you if you see a connection, to use there's emoticons, the icons, you can use those. And we're not going to necessarily go into a breakout discussion, but I would love for us to think about, if you think that they do, if self-care and community care relate to each other. I would love to hear folks, your thoughts on that. And I would like to invite some folks to either write it in the chat box, or if you feel comfortable, you can use your mic and tell us what you think the connection is, or how they relate to each other. Taking care of yourself is the first, thank you, Erika, is the first step to being able to give your best care for others. Absolutely, yeah. If I can't be good to me, then I'm not gonna have enough to give to other folks, right? If I take care of myself, then I can care for others, and I can offer that space of support, of loving kindness, of listening, of being fully present, that emotional labor and that labor of love that is, you know, connected to that, to our communities. Absolutely, yeah. When people around me are stressed, it stresses me out. So practice of mutual taking care of each other helps us all to be our best. Thank you, Charles. That is absolutely spot on. And they're related, because we are humans as, you know, social animals, and we need each other. If you're extroverted or introverted, it doesn't matter. Thank you, Melissa. That's true. It's like the whole airplane oxygen thing. I love that. Yes, you have to put your mask on, and then you gotta be able to help other people put their masks on. Absolutely. Yeah, if we don't have oxygen, then we can't breathe. And we just saw that breathing is super important. And it's a mirror, you know, Elizabeth is sharing, it's a mirror. It's, we give what we have and feel within. Absolutely. So we can see that there's a connection between like the care for ourselves and care for community, right? And that we cannot do one without the other. It's a symbiotic relationship that nurtures itself, right? It's that mirror that Elizabeth was sharing, right? And so thinking about, you know, in the time that we have left, thinking about, you know, how do you practice community care? How does your organization practice community care? And you can type it in the chat box. If there are some things that you think you could do better, what would those be? And who do you think is the role for community care? Who's responsible? Us, the workers, management, or the institution, right? And if it's possible to have community care, if any of us are not in sync, right? You know, because I may want it, but if other folks don't want it, then it's not going to happen, right?
I'll tell you what we do at HRC. We play happy hour, and Charles is an amazing DJ, so we put music.
Yes.
That's an idea of a harm reduction self-care, virtual happy hour.
Yes. Yeah, I think that is as vital. HRC, also one of the things that we've done is that we've allowed folks to, for example, before COVID hit, we were able to take time in the day to be able to go for a walk, or I would go to the gym, right? I would take time and I would go across the street to the gym and I would just box everything out and then come back into the office and continue the rest of my day. And I had the flexibility of knowing that I could work later and I could take that time and not feel guilty, right? Or to take time, we have summer Fridays where we work until 1 o'clock and then the rest of the afternoon counts as like they're still paying us for work, but it's, you know, but they're giving us that as a way for us to be able to take care of each other and take care of ourselves, right? So those are things that our organization is doing, right? And the reason that we're able to do it is because the executive team wants that to happen and because they're fostering that between managers and staff, and they've talked to the board to allow that to happen, right? So we're happy to share those for you, but I encourage you to think about some of these things. What are some of the things that you would like to see in each of your organizations, right? And how can you practice community care with your team, right? That morning check-in was community care for us, checking with each other, right? The fact that I could go to my colleague and say, I need to tap out because I'm not in a good place right now. I just realized something got triggered in me and I can't be in this space. Can you take over for me? With no questions asked, because I knew there would be no judgment, right? That was also community care. Melissa's sharing with us that everyone is responsible, that we take time to talk to each other and allow others to share their burdens and help things, you know, each other figure out how to solve things or navigate situations. Thank you. That's super important. That's part of that community care, team care. That is a practice, right? Asking for help and offering help, right, to our colleagues is also part of that practice. So we don't feel that we have to do it alone as well. Other folks have other thoughts, you can chat them in the chat box, or if you feel brave enough, you can unmute your mic. And staff smiles. Tiffany, I hate to put you in the spot, but I'm going to. Tell me more about that, because I want to know. I am intrigued.
So even pre-COVID-19, we have a monthly team meeting with all of the service providers just to go over logistics, successes, and challenges. But also throughout the month, we have a box, or now email, because we do the meeting via Zoom, where folks can give staff smiles about something they noticed or appreciated about one of their coworkers. And it's completely anonymous, and we share that at the end of every meeting.
Oh, that's awesome. And it's such a beautiful way of caring for each other, of like connecting to each other, of validating and really, you know, being present for folks. I really appreciate that. Charles is sharing with us that they're trying to stay in tune with their body so that they can feel when they need to be more conscious of either sleeping, eating, exercise, etc. One thing that we do in our office too, thinking about, I think Jasmine said about food, was saying, hey, have you taken a lunch break today? Have you gone to the restroom to take care of your body? Sometimes I'm sitting for 5 hours. I'm like, oh my God, I gotta go pee. I forgot about my body. I haven't done this. And my coworkers are like, go, you know? And so thinking about, you know, how do we do that for each other is part of that community care as well. And Tiffany's saying kudos to JC, who implemented the staff smiles for the organization, which I think I may borrow if I have permission from folks. And so